Thank you for your participation. We will now pass the floor to Alfredo Reyes Krafft. He is a doctor in law with cum laude and also studied at the IPADE. He has a specialty training at the University of Salamanca. He has been a controller at the Bank of the Atlantic. He is member of the board of the NIC and a president of the Mexican Institute of Internet. He currently works at BBVA and Lex Informatica Lawyers. He is vice president executive of the Mexican Institute for Internet and also part of the Bankers of Mexico. He is a member of the board of Mexican Association for Commerce Standards, Vice President of the Commission of Economics for the International Chamber of Commerce, member of the Institute for Telecommunications, member of the group that is promoting electronic commerce, community member of Alfaredi, and a member of the Mexican Internet Chamber. He is the first Mexican in obtaining CPDD certification from the IMSS forum in Spain. He's a certified professional in protection of personal data in standardization and NICE. Up until 2013, he was a professor of legal of Internet and Legal Affairs at the UNAM, has a master's at Infotech and also at the ITESM. He is a professor of e-commerce at the University of Salamanca. He is the author of the electronic signature book and also legal aspects and protection of data in Mexico, perspectives and challenges, protection of data in Mexico, and he's also an author of legislation and regulation in an encyclopedia published by Porrua and the Center for Investigation and Research of the Mexican School of Law. I tried to sum this up. Oh, well, I was going to speak very little, but hopefully this has added a bit more substance. First of all, it's an honor to be here. I thank you. I thank the INEGI and Infotech and for this invitation. I'm sure you have some very interesting speakers here. I will speak of the commercial aspects of big data, and now I will speak of electronic signature. And I think it's going to perhaps sound strange for you what this might have to do with big data, what e-signature has to do with big data. Well, big data with what Ronald has mentioned and Javier has mentioned and Leandro has mentioned, I think there's very little I can add. I think I would be repeating concepts, and I think there's not much case. I have some information with me because the use of data, the handling of data is nothing new. The truth is that in industry and commerce, we've been doing it for a very long time. The only issue is that with the advancement of technology, information, and communications, we have access to more and more data, more and more information, where we process this information. And at the end of the day, this is going to help us in the commercial aspects. But we must, as companies, comply with norms and law. And Leandro was saying the differences and the problems that are presented in the face of the industry. Today, we have sectors of industry that have adopted massively products related to the management, administration, and profiling of customers. Also, just like the internet was a factor that we thought might break intermediaries in commerce because it affected many chain values, the analysis of information in large volumes from different sources at a high speed, and which without precedent, at a speed without precedent, can turn or suppose a differentiating factor for those who decide to adopt it, or for those of us who have decided to adopt it. Today, let me give you an example. In the case of RF, identification through radio frequency, it generates impressive amounts of data. This means that it's 1,000 times more data or information or useful information than the one used from a barcode, or the one that we had reference to in a simple barcode. So the more we can refer to this, the people who are using their cell phones, sending messages. More than 5 billion people tweet and surf the web through their own phone. Facebook, more than 1 billion users, more than 340 million tweets every day, more than 2.5 trillion bytes of data. Walmart, for instance, manages 1 million transactions with customers every hour. So every second we have more than 10,000 payments with credit cards. This information can be useful and can be useful. Having one thing is having a bunch of data. Another thing is being able to use it in a practical sense. I can be legitimately responsible of different data, complying with the law, and even though I'm still responsible of this data, also the use for this, well, I can use it to create statistics for consumption that may allow me to predict what the next consumption of a person might be. So I can use this to prevent potential fraud, or to prevent or avoid issues related to loss, to knowledge, the fact that you can predict and locate profiles of customers that can allow us to better services and prevent problems such as financing terrorism, money laundering. And that can imply a better management of the information. We're referring to petabytes, different types of information, internal, external data, structured data, and non-structured data. Today, we operate with data, with structured internal data. What do we want to reach? Having data access to external information, non-structured information, will allow us to generate consumption tendencies, profiling, and this, I think, will refer to a series of results, structured results. So an important consideration in terms of concrete examples of use today has to do with customer analysis and knowing potential customers, market analysis, operational effectiveness of the institutions, as well as the radio frequency model, the possibility of using our data. So we have a certain good, we want to know the life cycle of this good, and where this good, which is part of this record, even to the moment where it's thrown into trash and is no longer usable, I can trace it, and up to a certain extent, potential risk and fraud analysis. It's truly important. Where are we, and what do we want to reach as part of the commercial process, we're trying to differentiate ourselves, and this differentiation has to do with the information that will derive to an exchange derived based on information through networks based on information as well. So this touches each of the sectors of a company. Let's reconsider the beginning, the electronic signature. Javier was saying that we need standardization in information flow and communication between the different public administrations and municipal administrations. So there's no exception in this case. In the case of Mexico in particular, just to give an example, we have several central agencies that identify potential users of a model of electronic signature to obtain their digital signature and authenticate this. But however, these central authorities consider different certification providers. These certification providers, with their certification from the central agency, have the possibility of certifying certificate holders. In other words, they can certify a person to authenticate them through a digital valid seal, and when they sign electronically a document, I can validate the fact that this signature responds to an individual who is the holder of the certificate. What is the issue? Public administrations do not speak among themselves. So we have a possibility of, instead of consider the possible cost of this to our country, it forces a citizen. So in order to interact with different administrations, whether municipal, state, or federal, to have a digital seal that's different, because they're different among them, or because they don't trust the enrollment process for the obtention of this digital seal. So what is being done by public administration? It's investing and spending double, triple, or how many states are there in the country? How many municipalities are there in the country? Well, a citizen that wants to interact with them would need to obtain a digital seal from an accredited institution. So this generates a problem, a serious problem, because remember that the digital seal is not illimited. It's limited to a certain amount of time. So multiply the amount of emitted certificates by the number of citizens, by the number of states. Well, it's going to be very much more expensive. We say the broth will be more expensive than the chicken. So in other words, we need to generate a process of trust. So we need to generate schemes, first norms and standards, and this will lead to greater precision. So let's see this from a perspective of data. When your child or one of our childs is just born, what do? You go to the civil records, civil registry, and you ask for 20 copies of the birth certificate, because you need one for school, one for his driver's license, one for the hospital, one for his employer, one for his military service. So each of them requires a birth certificate, and which another authority is requesting, who also depends on the public administration. So what is the purpose of keeping 80 records or 80 files, if we can refer them to a single file that is currently existing and which is the civil registry. So we are disorganized, we are operating in a disorganized fashion.
Standardization is very important. It is very important to standardize regulation, and big data is not new. Big data arose from a need to know the client, a need to know the citizen. I believe that the more this way of operating becomes more complicated, the only thing this will result in is in this continuing in a disorderly manner. We will standardize, we will open criteria, we will make information transparent. For example, the case of data, today, having sufficient infrastructure to process such a vast quantity of information is costly. What do I need to have in place? Well, the suppliers, infrastructure, and so on. So in what manner might we align this information with our business, with business in particular? There's also the issue of budget limits. At what point am I supposed to extract that information, and where can knowledge gaps be found? Today, Javier was already discussing these gaps that might take place. And Leandro was also discussing these information gaps. If the information is not quality information, then hardly will it be reliable. Therefore, my stance is to open up the possibilities of information, dissociating them, but not putting so many obstacles in for access. It is very clear for me that big data must and refer to people in most cases, but there are pieces of data that do not necessarily refer to people. And now, if we were to restrict this, because at times we are more the partisan of the Pope, that the Pope itself, in the management of certain information, let us try to find a certain logical and objective and possible model, and in that context is how we should start working. Perfection is at odds with what is good. So let us establish, let us restrict, let us put in place dissociation or anonymization models for information itself. But let us do this in a coordinated manner. Management of data. There's a side of the statistical management of data to determine if it is anonymous or not. It's something that exists. There is already a method, and there is actually a very interesting project arising from the regulations. There is a very interesting regulatory project to look for dissociation, because it is easier to say than anonymization. But today, big data players may be divided into large groups: data professionals and technology suppliers. Within the context of infrastructure, there are important technological suppliers of big data. There are some that supply third-party management software. There are those that supply it. There are those that operate it or supply operational databases. There are others that only provide a framework. There are others that offer analytical services in the cloud, and that is something else we will also need to discuss: the cloud infrastructure as a service or analytics plus platforms. Within these elements, what I would be interested in doing is to discuss what would be the short-term future of big data. Will where are we going? Will we be discussing a science of data or just obtaining intelligence from data? If you particularly were to enter a big data model, what would be needed is not focus or not investing so much in burdensome tasks. It is necessary to have a roadmap to find value on the data itself. Then finding to take advantage, at least internally, of what is being used and managed, which is information in order to promote a social revolution. To foster a center of skills, the management of change is essential, and also it is necessary to manage risk. Usually, it is preferable to use internal data at the beginning, use structured data, then jump to unstructured data, and then start taking external data sources. Side of contracting, the legal side is important. The side of dissociation needs to be corrected. There are many texts published about this. There are many texts that address these sort of issues. When trade began, when we discussed trade, we said, well, now electronic trade is coming, and we distinguished electronic or e-trade as a different type of trade, different from the commercial, from the conventional definition of this. But suddenly we started to put our feet on the ground because it was not about a new way of doing business. It was about different means to perform these trade activities. So we now talk about e-trade, and now mobile trade is coming. There's an enormous amount of information for mobile trade, and now social trade, social commerce, the possibility of interacting in social networks gives us and provides us with information that might be very important to exploit it for economic benefits, to obtain higher security, and also for compliance reasons. So it is important to standardize, to start discussing social networks. We should not be scared by the having big data. It is not something new. It is something that we have already done, something we have experience in. And let us start walking in this direction, because a 1,000-mile journey begins with the first step. Thank you very much.